Hi there, welcome back to Diagonal Move. My name's Neil, and today I'm going to play through a game called the Battle for Ramadi, which is a solitaire specific game focusing on the Iraqi security forces recapture of the city of Ramadi from ISIS during 2015. It's published by Tiny Battle Publishing and designed by Jay Ward. This version of the game is my own print and play copy. I'm sure that when you make your own copy or purchase a game, the results would be far better than what I've got here. But let's work with what we've got for today. Okay, so the game is based around this map, and you need to manage your forces to take 6 different locations within the city in order to defeat ISIS. However, the victory condition is that you must take the government complex or you cannot win. Plus, you have to have a higher victory point total than ISIS do. There's a few different conditions for scoring for both sides, and what the game is really is a case of trying to achieve your objectives in terms of territory while minimising the number of casualties your side's taken during the combat. Definitely easier said than done. Quick look at the way the game works. You have a few different phases. An operations phase for you as the ISF player. There's an ISIS attack phase, which may or may not occur. And then we have what's called the operations interface, which is basically admin, moving things around the board. There is a operations table, and depending on the number of casualties, you will roll a die, and the number of casualties will determine how many operations you can take. And as the casualty numbers grow, the number of operations available to you decrease. So the game gets more challenging over time if you cannot keep a lid on those casualty numbers. There's a setup table, and there are a few different units which I'll show you in a moment. And then we have a operation result table, which is based partly on dice rolls, partly on the units that you have available, and the same for the ISIS attack when and if it happens. It probably will, but it's not guaranteed every round. In the what's called the operations center, which is this board here, we have a few different units. We have army, counter-terrorism specialists, police and militia, plus what's called the emergency battalion. There's no real difference between these units other than their strength. It's not a game that has a great deal of detail in the sense of functionality of the units. However, we do have at the bottom here this line of what are called ground assets, and these can be added to an operation to support whichever units you've sent in. The operation centre is split into 3 areas, so north, west and south, and these correspond to the red parts on the map on the starting locations, and essentially they're the supply source, the logistical entry point for your units. And once you have committed units into one of these entry areas, there's then a process for transferring them, which does take a few rounds. We have 3 of these cups, and inside here are the ISIS forces. There's the army, for want of a better description. There are what's called assets, which are things like vehicle-based IEDs and so on, and then we have IEDs themselves. And when you perform an operation, you'll choose a location on the board where you're going to have your operation. You'll decide which forces to commit, and then you will draw 1 from each of those cups to determine the strength of the ISIS forces during that operation. Okay, all that's left to do now is to deploy our forces into the starting positions and we're ready to start. One thing I didn't mention is we do have a couple of air support units available as well, which I'll explain as we get to them. For the purpose of this game, we're not using the optional drone rules, just the standard air support rules. I think we're more or less ready. One thing I will say though is that everything, in terms of the counters at least, everything is quite green and similar colour, so I'll just be using these cubes to identify where an operation is taking place. Okay, let's set up and start the first turn. Okay, we're all set up, ready to start first turn, and let's go. So I'll roll a die. Rolled a 2, and looking at the table, with a casualty rate of 0 to 10, we can use perform 3 operations on a die roll of 2. It's not the best start, if we're honest. So what we need to do is to decide where we're going to put these operation counters. And with the exception of the southern part of the map, the only way into the city is across the bridges. And there's 5 bridges we can try and cross. These rivers are impassable except for the bridges, so that's quite an important location. So we'll do an operation on the Albufarage Bridge and the Ramadi Bridge, and then let's put a operation to the south as well, and I'll place it here where there's no terrain. Terrain effects are fairly simple, and I'll explain them as we go to the individual operations. A quick word about stacking. There's a maximum of 2 units in a hex, and the order in which you stack them is important. Should an operation incur casualties, it's the first token, or the topmost counter, that's removed as a casualty. Regardless of its strength, it's simply removed, although it can come back into play later. And the means by which you support the operation is by adding the 2 values together, the light strength values. The number on the bottom can only support up to its value. So for example, or up to the value of the top counter. So for example here, we can add the 3 to the 4, that's no problem. The other way around, we can only add a maximum of 3 to that top counter. So here we would have a value maximum of 6. The other way around would be a maximum value of 7. And that's important for when determining the strength of your operation, plus casualties, because typically most of the time you'll lose 1, and it's usually the top one. So it's that balance to think about between strength and both of your units and the risks to them as casualties. Anyway, replace the operations, and I'll use these cubes to identify where they're going to be, because we need to take them off in a moment. And this isn't a strategy guide, but we need to take those bridges, and what we'll do now is we'll decide to use this group of units to attack this bridge, and all we'll do is take 1 counter. I'm getting ahead of myself. We need to supply the support units first, and these are the ground assets. And as mentioned before, you can only take the ground assets from where you have assigned them on the operations board, and I have assigned them here, 2 in each area, and so the 2 in the top can only go to the top, the topmost operation. And so, for example, what I have is, and you can only assign 1. So even though I have both a Special Forces Advisors and artillery, only one of them can support that operation. Special Forces, from memory, allow you to roll 2 die and choose the best, or you can simply add 4 to your attack strength using the artillery, and that's what I'll do. I'll assign the artillery to that operation. And then I need to draw 3 counters from the ISIS cups. So our first counter is a Army of Adversity, valued at 1. Our second counter is the asset counter, who in this instance are foreign fighters, and they have a value of 3. There's no special effect with those. And finally, we have an IED. And this isn't a particularly good IED, so we simply have a strength of 0. So at the moment, as it currently stands, we have an ISF force of 7 plus 4 against an ISIS force of 4. And then we'll roll a die, 1 for each side. So I've rolled a 1, and we've rolled a 4 for ISIS. Because we are on a bridge, the terrain has an influence on the rolls. And so here it's a -1 because we're on a bridge. So we basically remove that die. So we're facing 7 against 8, which means we have lost our first operation, or our first operation has been defeated, which is pretty shocking. Shocking start. The ISIS forces will gain a victory point for having defeated my operation. Apologies for knocking the camera. Now, because they've defeated the operation, we automatically lose 2 casualties, which means that they also achieve 1 victory point per casualty. So they're now on a score of 3, and we remove both of our forces. The casualty system is fairly interesting because the counters are returned and they're flipped. They stay like this throughout the next turn, and then on turn 3 they would be brought back into play. So the way I tend to remember this is I put them at the bottom when they're current casualties, I move them up, and then finally flip them back when they're ready to be redeployed. So that's a system I tend to use. It helps me remember it. The artillery is taken off and popped back into its location, ready for use in a later round. Okay, so that was pretty poor start for my team. Let's move on then to the western area, and we have an operation again. It's on a bridge. These counters are popped to one side. The ISIS counters popped to one side until they're ready to go start the next turn. And we have these two counter-terrorist units on the table. I will add my bridge operation counter ground asset, and what that does is it minimises any IED token. So essentially, even though we will draw an IED counter, that number is removed from the die roll, or that counter is removed from the total. So, ISIS forces, we have 1 Army of Adversity, we have 1 civilian asset. I'll come to that in a moment. Till it's a modern war game, the civilians are assets. And then finally we have an IED value of 2. So our bridge counter is going to remove the IED, which is a good start. I've lost my die. There we go. Go in the corner. Roll the die. Currently we have a good advantage here with special forces. Sorry, ISIS forces, ISF forces of 8 versus an Army of Diversity force of 1. Roll a die. Wow, they're rolling much better than us. Again, it's on a bridge. We reduce our die roll by 1, So we now have 9 versus 7. We have a +2 result on our combat, and that means that we win control of that area. And however, we still have to check the casualties, and in this instance we roll a die, and if we roll 4 or more we take a casualty. And so a die, we've rolled a 5, so we take a casualty, and our current casualty level is at 3. And then we increase the ISIS victory points by 1 because they get a victory point for that casualty. Now, civilians, as an asset, they are basically considered casualties or at risk of being casualties. So I believe it's a 3, I'll just double check. Top of my head, it's a 3 that we have to roll. Yeah, so again, we roll a d6, and if it's a 3 or higher, there are casualties, and ISIS get a victory point, which they do. So ISIS are already streaming ahead of us in terms of points, because currently the only point that we have is... No, actually we don't have any points because we've taken a bridge hex and there's no points for bridge hexes. Points are scored by ISF based on the number of urban hexes or the town hexes, the number of emirs killed, which we don't have any out at the moment, any defeated ISIS attacks, and then +5 for the objective spaces. Sorry, I do have some glare on the screen. It's a bright day today. Struggling to remove it. Okay, so that's the end of our operation. Last thing we need to do is move one, or at least one, of our forces onto the bridge. These go. Okay, final operation of the first turn. Same thing, we will move... Well, we'll decide what we're committing first. I think because we've got quite a weak force there, we'll commit the special forces, and the special forces allow you to roll 2 die. So our current ISF score is 3. ISIS have a local special forces valued at 3, an asset of a suicide vest IED, and a regular IED valued at 1. Wow. So we have 5 ISIS versus 3 ISF. 2 die for... it's better. 2 die for the ISF, thanks to the special forces, and then 1 more, a 2. So we're playing 9 against 7, means a +3 for us, and on a +3 we win control, and we roll a die for casualties, and on a 5 or higher we incur casualties, but we haven't because we rolled a 1. So that was a much more successful operation. And now we need to move our forces, and in this instance I will move both into that operation space because they're quite weak, and should they get attacked, which they won't this turn, basically you have to draw a counter to signify the attack, but should they get attacked in a later turn and we haven't supported them, they are at risk of being defeated with just that weak force. Okay, the operations interface. Now what that means is we do various round admin. We can move any units on the map. So I think it would be worth adding a force to the bridge, slide some of them up so they can move in through there as we attack the Justice Compound, or hopefully attack the Justice Compound. I think that will probably do for now. Probably worth moving those just to one side so we can take advantage of the space that we've got. And I think what I'll actually do is I will move the weaker unit back and the stronger unit forward in that location. And hopefully we'll either come up here or we'll go this way towards the Ramadi station. Remember, it's that space we need in order to be eligible for point scoring. Over on this board, our casualties move up, ready to deploy next turn. We didn't use our air assets, nothing else to do there. Nobody needs transferring, which is where you can move these assets around by moving them into this box and so on. I think we're good to go for turn 2. There are only 10 turns in the game, which puts quite a time pressure on achieving this, especially if you start to struggle in the early rounds. Okay, so first thing we need to do, roll that die and work out how many operations we can take. Roll 5. We've got just 3 casualties at the moment, so that is 5 operations. That's more like it. Okay, so 5 operations. Let's move towards the station. For our first operation, we'll try and take that bridge for a second. Justice compound here, which is a victory point X, for a third. And why not? Let's try and take the bridges as well. See how we get on with that. Right. Let's commit our ground assets, and I think we will again commit the artillery to the north. So long as you've got enough space, enough tokens, assets, you can actually commit 1 to each operation, but you can't commit 2 to a single operation. So I have a bridge in the west, a bridge asset in the west, and a tank also in the west. And down south we will use victory point X. That's going to be tough. Victory point X is our it's an urban hex. Still an urban hex. This is a victory point hex here. Let's commit the special forces so we get that reroll, and then let's ensure that we take that victory point hex by taking a air asset and placing it on the justice compound. Okay, cool. Let's go through and work out our operation resolutions. So starting in the north, we have artillery and 2 units, which is a CTS unit and an army unit, for a total of 10. The ISF counters need to go back in the box. Okay, let's see what we're up against on the bridge. So, quite a weak start. Vehicle-based IED and a regular IED. Roll the die. Remembering to modify for the terrain. And we have 8 versus 11, so that's a +3. Roll the die again. Roll a 2, and on a +3, 5 or higher is a casualty. No casualties. That's excellent. So we have taken the bridge finally, and we can now move one of our guys onto the bridge, and I will move that stronger unit into the bridge. So that's much better, much more like it. Moving to the south, let's do the south first. We have two units. We have a police force and a an army unit, plus special forces. And we have army of adversity, an attack. Okay, we leave that to one side, but let's place it to one side. That'll come up in a moment. Final counter then is an IED. Okay, so 2 die for the ISF forces. We'll choose the 4. And 1 die for ISIS, which is 3. So we are at 9 and 7. However, we are in an urban hex. Because we're in an urban hex, the modifier is -2. So we now are drawn. Okay, and a draw on the table is basically ISIS has defeated us, so they get a victory point. That's unfortunate. On a D6 roll is 3 or higher. Then we have a casualty. So our casualty was, our top unit was this one. So he's lost. Operation has failed. Which is somewhat frustrating, isn't it? Especially as we will have an attack shortly. Okay. I'll just keep this here to remind myself that there is an attack shortly. Okay, let's do the bridge. And now we have a emergency battalion and a police force up against a militia. Foreign fighters and a deep IED. Wow. Okay. Thankfully, we do have that bridge counter, which minimises the IED. So 3 against 3. Remove the 1 because of the bridge for the terrain, and we have again failed the operation. This time we failed it completely, so both of those guys are casualties. So ISIS will then gain a 1 point for the defeating our operation, and then a further 2, and our casualties are on 3 still at the moment. Okay. We still haven't got any points. Okay. Moving on to the next operation, which I certainly hope is more successful than the last one. Okay, so a bridge again. This time it is the Ramadi barrage bridge. We have 2 counter-terrorist specialists, a tank and air support. We should do okay, one hopes. So they are up against local special forces. Freedom fighters. And a poor IED setup. That's not bad. So with excuse me, ISF have some 15 as their baseline, and ISIS 6 -1 for the terrain, so that's going to be a 5. So we have 10 against 20, which means we roll 1 die. And on a 6 we have a casualty, no casualties. We have, oh, I do apologise, that is the justice compound, that's the victory point X, so we need to actually reduce the terrain effect by 3, so that would have been 3. So it is still 18 against 10 though, so we still only roll 1d6. However, because it is that justice compound and it is a scoring hex, there is an automatic modifier of -3 to the casualty roll. I can't remember what the casualty roll was, so let's roll again. So it's basically there's a casualty. I believe it's 3 plus the die roll, so that would make sense the other way around. So it's 3 plus the die roll, which is a casualty. So although we have taken the justice compound, we do suffer a casualty. So there's 1 point for ISIS, another casualty for us. We remove the tank back to the holding box. The air asset has a similar situation to the casualties in that they start expended, they slowly become available, and then they're finally available for use. So they start at the bottom, right the way up. And we move one of our counter-terrorist units into the justice compound. That's much better because that is now our first victory points, and it is 5 victory points. Of course, if we lose that justice compound, we do reduce our victory point total accordingly. Okay, one more operation this turn, and then we're going into the cleanup phase. This time we're on a bridge, and we'll use the 2 units here. No supporting tokens on this occasion, because we just didn't use it. It seems I didn't allocate it. Anyway, let's not worry about that. We have a 2. And a Emir. Okay, we'll have to double check the rolls for the Emir. And then finally we have a deep IED. Okay, so 3 versus 7. 6 and 6. I deduct 1 for the factor on a bridge. And we have 8. They have 13, so we have lost miserably. Both those units are dead. Automatic casualties. ISIS gain 3 victory points. Wow, that's not good. Okay. Right. And that is the end of the operation phase of that round, with the exception of the Emir. And I believe it's a case of rolling a die and checking to see what the special effect is. So, roll a 4. Yep, there we go. Roll a d6, 4 or more, we gain a victory point, and the Emir counter is removed from the game. Excellent. So he is removed, and we gain a victory point. Salvage something from that last round, and that there is some question over this, whether you do that, whether you win the objective or not, and it's clarified on Board Game Geek that you do. Same with the civilians. So just moving into what's now the attack phase, or the ISIS attack phase. And you only do this once per turn at most, and this is that counter at the bottom. And during the ISIS attack phase, you basically attack the weakest conquered, or the weakest territory ISF hold, and wherever possible you take a held territory without a unit on. Now we can't do that currently because we've got units on all our territories that we hold, so we will attack the police force down there with a value of 2, and the the way an attack works is there's a small procedure to follow. So essentially we roll a die and work the combat out with an attack strength of 3 versus the attack strength of 2. There's a 3. And then the same for this guy, overdrawn. And in the draw, we refer to the card again. The ISF is a casualty. Yeah. Oh dear. Okay. That guy's a casualty. They get a point. Adjust the VPs if the line of communication is cut, which it is not. Okay, fine. Now, Operation Intel, we can move forces around. Let's move a guy here, here. If you cut those lines of communication, say we got much further on and cut the line of communication, we had a unit that was isolated. So, for example, if the unit was here and there's no way back to their originating point, you would actually not be able to support that unit with any ground assets or anything like that. So it's quite, lines of communication are very important, and those ISIS attacks are designed to cut those lines of communication. Right, I think we're good for that. We just need to move our forces onto the board as mentioned previously. Okay, so now we have units that are available for assignment to a location, which I will place them. Let's place them both in the north. We need to ensure we get hold of that government complex. Okay, round 3. Once you do get the hang of what you have to do in this game, it does move very quickly. We should have. Yep, we've still got enough. Okay, right. Round 3. Roll a die. Roll a 6. We have 5 units again because we still have quite low casualties. 5 objectives rather. And again, we will try to move in and take that government complex. And if we don't, we can't win. In terms of what else we're going to do, I don't know. It seems a shame. You don't have to use all 6 of these, but it does seem... The trouble we've got is some of our units are quite weak. I don't really want to risk losing a control of a government hex or a objective victory point hex. Let's just let's try the bridge again. Let's try to take the bridge. And then, yeah, I think we're going to have to try and move in at the top here as well. So I'm just going to use 3 of those available operations, which seems slightly wasteful. However, we do need to get here because otherwise ISIS are going to run away with victory points and we'll still be struggling to get that. Okay, so first one then, a 2 and a 4. Oh, we didn't assign the... Okay. Have another attack. So 4, baseline is 4 versus 10, and that's now 9, and we reduce by 2 for the terrain effect, so we are facing 13 and 9. That's +4, so we win, which is fantastic. And the 5 or greater results in a casualty. We rolled a 5. ISIS gain a victory point anyway. Our casualties go up. However, we do take control of the area, which is fantastic. And it's an urban hex, so a cleared urban hex is a +1 victory point for our side as well, which is a nice change. Next objective is going to be the urban hex here as we move out of the justice compound. So again, pretty decent starting force for us. Just hope we don't end up losing that hex. We've got quite a strong showing. I thought about it a bit closer. I would have committed some air support, but that would have run at risk of losing that air support. That air defense counter just there. And finally an ID. Wow, they didn't put up much of a fight there at all. Remove that. So 3 versus 11. We're miles ahead on that space. Roll that again because I didn't roll properly. 4, and it's a 6+ to take a casualty given the differential there. So that's actually a very good result for us. Okay, so another victory point for us. And let's move on to the third objective. Which is the bridge. We have a very weak militia force here, but we do have the bridge clearing engineers. So the engineers in the bridge will remove any IEDs for us, and there really wasn't very many. So let's see what the ISIS forces throw at us. This time we're all an attack. Okay, we've drawn 2 attack tokens. That will simply get, second one will simply get put to the side, and a new counter drawn. Foreign fighters. And wow, they don't want us to get that bridge, do they? So 6 versus 2. Modified for the fact it's a bridge. Wow, lost miserably. So they're both casualties. So 3 victory points for ISIS, which is 1 each for the casualties, +1 for defeating our operation, and then 2 casualties on our casualty track. And we're now nearing the point where our casualties tip over into reduced operations. Before we do that, let's sort out our ISIS counters and then do the ISIS attack phase. And in this instance, the ISIS attack phase will be on the weakest area, and the weakest area is that bridge. So we'll just do that in just a moment. So they roll with a 3, and I roll with my own defence. There's no other modifiers, it's literally one against the other, and they have defeated us. We take another casualty, and we give them a victory point for having successfully attacked us. No line of communication cut to a victory point hex. Yeah, it's just even though you get points for the urban areas, just these 6 places are the official victory point hexes. Okay. That's not good, because we now cannot provide support to that unit. Okay, round tidy up. Do I want to transfer anything? No, not at the moment. However, I do need to. Yes, I do. Let's move our guys like so. That bridge is still not taken. That's not cool. Okay, so tidying up the round. Both air units are available. Our soldiers now are able to be moved onto the starting hexes, and these casualties this turn are moved up. Going into round 4. So let's place our units in their starting areas. And I think we need to provide as much support as we can in the north. Gosh, fairly weak forces in the south now. Okay, roll a die. So 6. Oh, okay, we still have, because our casualty rate is at 10, we still have 5 operations, even though we are on the cusp of where it tips. So 5 operations. I'm going to have to try and get that bridge in, the bridge in the north. Moving across the urban hex here to hopefully provide a joining link. Let's attack here as well into this cleared hex. So even though we've got 5, we could attack here. I would prefer that to be the other way around. Let's wait for now, see what happens. So just the 3 objectives again. Okay. Starting it with our, let's supply smoke. We cannot supply that guy with an asset. Although we're not going to be using him as part of the combat, it's only from 1 hex to 1 hex. So let's supply a army truck with artillery, and let's make sure we get some air support in as well. Down the bottom we'll have special forces, and then a tank near the top. Okay, let's start at the top. We've got 5 plus 4 plus 4, that is 15. And ISIS are we have 1. Another attack. And a 3. So pretty safe to say we've won here. But we need to work out the differential for the casualties. So we have 10 versus 14, so that's plus 4. Rolled a 4. that's okay in terms of casualties. So we win, we claim that bridge. Moving to the south, we have quite a weak force, plus the option to re-roll, or sorry, the choice of 2 dice with the special forces counter. Pretty poor showing there from ISIS to start with. Air defence, again, no effects here. And a 1 for the IEDs, so I'll take the 6. No terrain reduction because it's a clear hex, so we are 9 versus 6. That's a +3 for the casualty difference. That's a 4. Again, no. Oh, it was a +3. No, yeah, that's fine. +3. 5 or greater for the casualties and no casualty. Great. So our forces move in. ISIS are taken away. Final operation of this turn. And we are moving into a clear hex again, so no terrain differentials. Quite a strong force. And an attack, that just goes to one side. It's our second attack. Our asset then is a vehicle-bound IED. And then a prepared IED. So, in terms of the numbers, we have 4 versus 10. Oops, we're on a clear. I don't know where that went. Oh, let's take him out as a casualty. No, so we have a 5, no terrain effect, and a... No, he won't. He must have gone there. He was with our army, wasn't he? 5 and a 3, so no terrain effect, so we are at 15 versus 7, so we're way over 6. No casualties, we take that space. Okay, but no victory points. Okay, we'll just do the attack, and then I think what I will do is I will skip ahead. The game progresses in a fairly similar way for a few more turns yet. Do the attack. So our attack is going to be on these 2 units at the bottom. They're the weakest. Oh, actually, maybe that one's the weakest. How does it resolve that? Good question. Let's just assign it a 1 to 3 and a 4, 5, 6. Okay, do this attack, this one at the bottom, and attack of 3 versus an attack of 3. They've won 2 casualties, and 3 victory points for them. Okay, and then we'll just do the tidying up phase. So we can shuffle some of these guys along. Okay, and I think what we'll do is we will actually stop there because I've covered the main mechanics of the game. We are going to be stretching into over an hour shortly. As it currently stands, we are at a grand total of 8 victory points and a couple of hexes away from the government complex. And ISIS are on 23 points, so not only do we need to make up a fair points differential, we also need to take and hold that hex. So what I'll do, I'll skip forward a few rounds and come back again towards the end of the game so you can see how the game actually played out, but I won't go through every single round. See you in a moment. Back with what may be the final turn of the game. It's only turn 8, but I think we are reaching the point in the game where the ISIS numbers are simply growing too high for us to claw back. But I just wanted to show you this turn because this turn we should, fingers crossed, be attacking the government complex. However, it's worth noting this is the part of the game now where we're starting to need to leave our line of communication somewhat undefended, because in order to secure points that are more important, such as the government complexes and the bridges, some of these extra spaces we're going to have to start to leave unsecured, even though we've claimed them. So this is a risk if we draw an attack this turn, because that's basically an automatic victory for an automatic attack victory for ISIS here. The ISIS units have got 30 points and we are at 9. I don't think 22 points is going to be that simple to achieve, even if we do claim more of these 3 turns. It's probably unlikely. So we'll see how it goes, but this will be probably my last turn of this game, I expect. So our casualty rate is now at 17 and we've got a 4, which means we have just 3 operations maximum. And we will go for the government complex, and we will also go for this hex here to try and ensure that we do have a line of communication for this unit should we need it. Other options are to attack here, doesn't really seem to be worth it, or attack this way towards the hospital, but we do have quite a weak force there. But let's do that anyway to see how we get on. Okay. In terms of assets in the north, we'll use the artillery in support there, and because this has got a line of communication from the north, we will use our special forces there. In the west, we'll just use our tank to support there. We have 1 air unit available, which I will actually use to support this assault here on the government complex. Okay, so let's start with the hospital. Just put these here. It's just so I know where everything came from. Okay, so let's start with the hospital. We have a police and a militia with a grand total of 3. However, with our artillery, we can attack with 4. So that's a total of 7. ISIS have a army of adversity valued at 1. We have an attack. That's not good news. And we have poor IED. So our attack values are pretty good. There's no terrain modifiers because we're on a clear hex. So it's just a straight die roll now. 5 in total and 10 in total. That's a +5 differential 4 casualties, and our casualties were 4. And on a +5, it's a 6 or more for casualties, so that's fine. We've taken that with no problem, but we have left quite a weak force behind. Moving on to the government complex, we have special forces and a bomber. We also have a tank and counter-terrorism. Now, I rather foolishly didn't move these in a different order, because even though it's a 7, because the higher number is at the bottom, the most it can provide is the equivalent number to the top. So that is a 6, it's for a total of 10. And the ISIS forces then are Army of Adversity again. An air defence, oh dear. And a prepared IED. Let's roll the dice. Special forces means we get to roll 2. Choose the 6. -3 because it's a government building. A 6 for them. And then the air defence has an effect on our operation support, air support. So basically I roll a d6 for this counter, and on a 4 or higher I fail my air support operation. Okay, so the air asset has been thwarted, which gives the ISIS a victory point. And we are left with a 10 versus 7. So we do take the government building, which is good. Which gives us +5 victory points, much needed +5 victory points. So we are now on 12, and that wasn't right. Now on 14. I'm going to make sure I get the right track. It's quite the colours, I find at least, do make some of the record keeping slightly more challenging than perhaps it needs to be. And just that last operation, and then the attack. So that last operation, then we have on our side a tank, CTS and an army unit. Oh, sorry, I didn't do the casualty roll here. So it's a 2 plus a 3. There was a 5-point difference, I think. Or whether it was 4 or 5, we still don't need to roll any casualties. No, I think we do. I'll increase it anyway. I can't remember now. And moving on with our final operation of turn 8. Air defence again. Fortunately, I don't need to worry about that so much this turn. Okay. So 5 versus 10. We are in urban, so take that away. 5 versus 8. Just wondering if, even because I rolled a 1 and it's a -2, do I need to modify that as well, or is it just the die roll? I can't remember. Yes, it is. It's not just the die roll, it's this as well. So it's actually 9 versus 8. So we do win by +1. On the casualty roll, that is a 4 or higher. We take another casualty, they take another victory point. We take a point for the urban hex, but we take away a casualty. And now we are left with a really tricky choice, because we have a single counter we can move at this point. The tank is a ground asset, so it doesn't count. So we have a single counter that we have to move. Thinking about it, we do have to move, so we are now left with an undefended line of communication. So although we've broken through, we do have that undefended line of communication. It's going to make things tricky for us. So all that's left to do is resolve the attack, and the attack is going to be on a cleared space. We've got a choice of two. I believe you just assign randomly. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Roll the 3. That's an automatic defeat. There is an increase in victory points for ISIS. No effect on our score because it's not an urban hex. Okay, and let's look at the situation, I think, before deciding whether to finish. We could get another 5 points here, which would, if we did, that would bring our total to 19, 20, bring our total to 20. However, they have a total of, should be that way around, they have a total of 35, 15 points, 2 turns to do it in. That would require 3 of these. Most operations we can get is 4. No, I don't think we can do it. I think we'll say that ISIS have won this particular battle for Ramadi. I hope you've enjoyed that. It's a nice game to play solo of an evening. You can usually get it done in an hour and a half or so. Takes a bit longer because I'm talking through it as we go, but it's a nice game. Quite a challenging game, I find, to win or to do well. I think I have only beaten it once, and that was very, very close. But really, there's that interesting choice between committing to get, you must do this, but then how much do you commit to get the rest of the victory hexes? That's the thing, because they're quite far into the city, and that exposes the supply lines, and if you cut the supply lines completely, these points are reduced. It gets to be quite a balance. And of course, you do have that casualty track to keep an eye on as well, and yeah, I do enjoy it. It's a very nice little game. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time.